With the upcoming business rates revaluation, we thought it beneficial to break down some of the main questions we are being asked by businesses and clients. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us direct if you need or would like any further information or clarity.
So Tim, what are business rates?
The business rates, which has been in place for hundreds of years, people are not fully aware of that, is actually a national property tax which is used by the government and local authorities to pay for local authority services. This is collected by the Finance Department based on a rateable value which is calculated by the Assessor, and that takes into account the assumed rent that might be paid by the occupier for that property, reflecting the building's current condition. So it includes tenants' improvements, so there's often a difference in the rateable value as to rent that might be paid. There are two parts, the rateable value and the multiplier, which is the rate poundage. Rateable value is calculated by assessors based on local property evidence, and the multiplier is the rate poundage, which is set by the Scottish Government on an annual basis, and that is applied to the rateable value, and the invoice is sent out by the Finance Department to the actual ratepayer who is named in the valuation role.
So is it similar to council tax?
No, there's often confusion about that, in that the assessor is actually responsible for calculating the council tax banding for residential property as well as commercial property. So the council tax is actually based on capital value of residential sales, whereas the commercial rateable value is based on rental evidence. So there is a significant difference.
And who is responsible for business rates?
Well, the value is actually calculated, as I've said, by the independent assessor, and there are 12 assessors throughout Scotland in various offices who are responsible for carrying out the analysis and value in their local area. So they have to make up a valuation roll, and the valuation roll will contain the rateable value, the name of the proprietor or landlord, the tenant and the occupier, and that information is then passed to the Finance Department, who issue the rates bill to the occupier, who is the party responsible for the rates.
How is it collected?
It is collected by the Finance Department, who issue the rates bills to the occupier in each case, and the ratepayer can actually pay in 10 monthly instalments, or they can pay in one lump sum, or they can contact the Finance Department to arrange a suitable payment plan through the 12 months of that period. So the Finance Department are the party responsible, and it is really important to bear in mind that if you get behind in your payments, that you do get in touch with the Finance Department, because we are finding that the sheriff officers are being appointed pretty strictly now where there are any delay in the payments made, and then there's a 10% increment added on to the outstanding amount. So it is Finance Department that are responsible, but it's really vital that you keep in touch with finance and you arrange regular payments.
What rates relief is available?
Well, when I started many moons ago, there were really only two types of rates relief that was available. That was more or less on vacant property and also on listed buildings. Now, due to government tinkering, there's about 14 different types of rates relief, ranging from small business rates relief, obviously vacant rates is still in place, business growth accelerator, which is was brought in because the vacant rates liability that was hitting landlords was putting a stymie on development. So they brought in business growth accelerator to try and assist in future development. So it's all fairly complicated. Most of them have to be applied for. They can be done online through the various local authorities, but obviously Graham and Sybil will be delighted to discuss any aspect of vacant rates relief that might be available or you might obtain. Obviously the COVID situation over the last couple of years, the government used the rating system to actually apply rates relief on hospitality, retail, leisure subjects, and that could still be available and backdated. It actually came to an end in June of this year, but if you missed out on that, an application can still be made and it can be done retrospectively.
Why are there revaluations?
The revaluations are done regularly, basically to update the value levels to reflect market changes between revaluation periods. So the longer you have between a revaluation, the rateable values get out of sync. So if there's a change in the market, that's supposedly to reflect the increase in value and in rents obtained for that particular type of property. So if there's an increase in office rent, at the next revaluation, you would find that office values would increase. This is more or less to try and reflect ability to pay, the assumption being that that tenant obviously has the ability to pay that rent, so in theory should be able to contribute more in actual rates. So in the past, revaluations were generally at 5-yearly intervals, but after the Barclay review, which considered all aspects of rating, that has now been changed to a 3-yearly timetable. So that will mean that there'll be less chance of there being huge disparity in value jumps or drops each time there's a revaluation. So that's why it happens.
Can I dispute my rateable value if I feel it to be incorrect? And if so, is it easy to appeal?
Yes, you can. At revaluation, the value can go up, it can go down, or it can stay the same. So it depends on the evidence available and what the assessor comes up with. Even if the value goes down, you can appeal it because the value may not have gone down far enough. And obviously, if it's gone up, you may wish to challenge that anyway. However, they've now changed the system. The Scottish Government has brought in new regulations, and it's quite similar to the English system, which is check challenge. Now, this is now, instead of appeals, they're calling it proposals. So in the past, you could just put in a short letter, which would say that you felt the value was too high and that you wish to appeal it. So it could be a 3-line letter. You just had to put the property address, the name of the client, and what the value you thought should be replacing it. So that was quite straightforward. And then you went to the assessor in the future and you discussed the value and all the evidence. However, that was quite straightforward. So there were thousands and thousands of appeals that used to be lodged. So the government decided they want to reduce that. So they've now replaced it with what they call proposals. Now the proposal will have to include a statement with your reasons why you think the value is incorrect, the evidence that you've come up with to support that, and also a detailed valuation and appraisal of how you've arrived at your own figure and why the assessor's value is incorrect. Now, this is still in a state of flux. The regulations are still to be issued, and that's likely to be the end of October. And with draft valuations to be available by November, this is going to be extremely tight. So even the assessors are not happy with this idea because although they're given the rights to actually refuse those proposals, the basis of that is still unclear. So I can't believe that at this stage in the almost revaluation coming year, we don't know what the rules and regulations are likely to be. But all we do know is a proposal will be allowed to be put in with your value, which will be quite detailed, and then the assessor will have to respond to that.
What potential changes can occur at revaluation?
Well, apart from a change in the rateable value, which the assessor will base on his evidence, the Scottish Government always reviews the rate poundage. So if there's a significant increase in rateable value right across the board, they can afford to reduce the rate poundage, and that will in fact collect the same amount of money. However, at this revaluation, we're expecting there to be quite a significant change in levels of value on different sectors because of what happened during the COVID scenario. So there's no guarantee that the rate poundage will be reduced. Also, they will reconsider all the relief packages that are currently available. This could specifically affect small business rates relief because there are value thresholds. And the last revaluation, as an example, the value threshold went from 12,000 up to 15,000. And so anyone with a single property at that level got 100% relief. Now, it's possible that the government might review the thresholds of the small business rates relief. So currently, ratepayers may not get the same level of assistance that they did in the past. Also, we don't know what's going to happen with growth accelerator relief. which is done on new buildings. Is that going to be continued over from this financial year into the next? So there's quite a few issues at stake here. Also, in the past, where there was large jumps in value, the government introduced transitional relief, which actually phased in the increase in rateable value and how that affected your bill. So all these things are in the melting pot, and we won't really know well until next year as to how this might be reviewed.
There has been some concern around sports clubs. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, in the past, if it was occupied by a sports club, the property obtained 100% relief if it was a not-for-profit organisation. Now, there's been word coming back that with all the rates relief being considered again, that sports clubs who have significant assets in their accounts, that would be possibly a large element of land or the buildings which would have been valued by on a cost basis for accounting purposes, they might take that into account when they grant relief. So it's possible that in the future, sports clubs may be asked to provide their accounts when they actually make the rates relief applications. Now, this is quite a significant concern because in the past, sports clubs didn't appeal their rateable values because they weren't paying any rates anyway, so there was no point in doing so. So in the past, these values have never been challenged, the facts have never been checked. So you could find that if this relief is reconsidered, golf clubs, hockey clubs, rugby clubs who have large elements of land and buildings within their assessment could find that they might be hit with a liability which they never did in the past. So that is of a concern as well.
What would you advise ratepayers to do when they receive their new valuation?
The first thing to do is make sure you take professional advice. Do not believe an agent who promises a reduction and asking for any sum of fee up front. There has been in the past situations where agents have appeared from down south promising reductions. Ratepayers have made a payment and then they've never heard another thing. So it's important to make sure that your advisor is RICS, that's the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, registered, and by chance Graham and Sibbald are registered with the RICS, so we have the professionalism to be able to provide you with the relevant advice. It's also important to make sure that you check what the possible liability will be, because the rateable value is not the amount you will pay. That is the actual bill will be based on the rateable value times the rate poundage and applying any rates relief that might be applicable. So the whole picture should be reviewed, and Graham and Sibbald can provide you with comment on the actual rates bill that you will have to pay and take into account any reliefs that you might be available to apply for in arriving at that. And remember, this value will remain in place for 3 years, but if there is likely to be a change in value, i.e. if you're going to build a new extension or you may be going to knock something down, there will be a change in value over that to reflect that change, and we can advise also on how that might affect your liability.
And finally, what changes could the Scottish Government introduce to the rating system in line with the Barclay Review?
Well, each revaluation, the Scottish Government can review all the regulations, the reliefs, and introduce new relief packages or different poundages, but it does tend to be in line with what their economic forecasts are and what monies they need to spend. So every relief is really reviewed at the revaluation, and the ones that are probably likely to be looked at will be small business rates relief. At the moment, that is at thresholds of £15,000 and £18,000. Now, when the revaluation comes along, it's possible that those value levels could change in line with the market and the changes in value of property. So people who were out with that, where the values fall, might suddenly discover that they do get rates relief, but others, where their values go up, might go outside the threshold. So that's a bit of a worry. The others might be, which is also mentioned in the Barclay Review, was listed buildings, because listed buildings get 100% relief when they are empty. And some people have thought that having an open-ended relief package such as that is unfair. So there was a statement within the review that the relief should only last for a period of 2 years at 100% and then 10% thereafter. There's not been any other comment on that, but watch this space because that is a possibility. That could raise obviously significant amounts of money. Nursery school relief, that was introduced about 2 years ago, but it was for a set timetable. So again, that would have to be reviewed and reinstated if that was to be extended for the next revaluation. So all of these things have to be looked at. The one, however, that is probably of most concern is that on sports club properties, the reviews did say that local authorities should be given the opportunity to review that relief, which may be up to 100% on sports clubs, where it's occupied by a building which is not for profit, solely for recreation, and is more or less an amateur club, so that the money generated tends to be put back into improving the facilities or covering ground costs such as that. So they are being asked to have a look at this to take into account the value of the assets that the sports club might have in their accounts. So it's possible that local authorities may be given the opportunity to review this, and they may come up with different decisions dependent on which local authority the property is located in, which would be totally unfair. It really needs to be, if any change has to be done across the board. So there are a number of these issues to be looked at, and we won't really know, along with the rate poundage, what's likely to happen until the early part of next year.
Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to a member of one of our team. You can also visit our website at www.g-s.co.uk to find out more about the upcoming 2023 revaluation.